Good morning from Northern Alberta, Canada. I'm Christy. Welcome back if you are new. Hi and welcome. In today's video, we're going to talk a little bit about how we are practicing sustainability on our hobby farm or homestead. Some of you would call it homestead. Some of you call it a hobby farm. Here in Canada, we would refer it as a hobby farm, but we are a farm. We're a flower farm. We grow our own food. And so I'm gonna share with you some of the things that I do here that helps us be very sustainable. And we're gonna start over here. One of the things that we do here on our hobby farm or homestead is we sell firewood. So we brought home a whole bunch of wood. This was cleared, these logs were cleared from an area where there was a forest fire, and this was stuff that was kind of scrap. So we brought it home and we sell firewood. We sell it in dump trailer loads, and we sell it in firewood bags, which you can kind of see over yonder. There's some bags over there filled up. And we use what's called a range road firewood processor. I can run this by myself, and it makes pretty quick work. It literally will load the bag for you, and or the trailer for you, because it has this conveyor. This table is an accessory we purchased with it. It usually does work, but it's out of commission right now, so I usually just roll the logs off and then process them in here. It has a splitter. It does the cutting and the splitting, all the things. So this helps us bring sustainability to our homestead in another way too, because we have a byproduct. So the byproduct of cutting this wood is shavings. So here we are with some shavings. These are good for in the garden as mulch, but I also use these in the chicken pens and for the horses. We also use it in our garden, in our pathways, and as a mulch, and we use it in our chicken coops. And I'll show you what that looks like right now. When I talk about it being a byproduct, it's one thing that we don't have to purchase to buy. So we are using the waste. We could sell it if we weren't growing our own food. We could sell it and make profit on it, or, but we would have to bag it and that would have more costs, or we can just use it to help create more healthy soil and to keep our animals comfortable. The wood is hardwood mixed. We have birch, which is a hardwood, which is really good for fungi. Specifically, the wine cap mushrooms that we have installed in our garden, hardwood, along with straw or hay. But because we cannot use straw, because of the chemical applications that are done to them, we tend to lean more towards using hardwood and hay, also cardboard. So that's one of the things that we do. I'm going to flip this around and show you what it looks like in the coop. So we're going to the guinea coop. These are the guineas. So we have our shavings in the guinea coop, which helps with insulation. What we do is we clean this out once it's littered, and we put it in our garden as a soil amendment. So here we raise chickens and guinea fowl. The guinea fowl, we use those as our main source of a pesticide control. So they really like to eat grasshoppers, and they also like tarnished plant bugs, which we've had a very big problem with here. So we allow our guinea population to free range, and they nest as they desire to. So we do not control how many are hatched. They go and do their own thing. Usually they regulate themselves because they are essentially living wild on our property during the summer, and they consume as many bugs as they can. Sometimes we do sell some or give some away, do trades for a new male or a new female. Our chickens, what we do with our chickens is all the stuff that comes out of the greenhouse. We have these piles. We make piles of weeds and the excess stuff that is coming out of our garden and our greenhouse. We bring it into our chicken area, and the chickens, they begin working on that, and they turn our compost for us. So we use their litter as a compost or as a soil amendment, but we also use all of the stuff that they turn and create compost out of, like the weeds and the seedless weeds. We don't put anything with seeds in for them to work on, but the green stuff, all the high nitrogen things, we bring it in here and they eat the bugs off and the larvae off, and they turn it and they eat some of the plant, and they create a really nice starting phase of a compost. We'll sometimes heap it and then they go and turn it for us, so they do a lot of our composting for us. We also collect eggs from them, and so we'll go see what that looks like right now. Hey girls, what's happening? Hey honey. Hey big guy, how's it going? Head toss at me. Alrighty, what we got in here for eggs? And there we go, we have some eggs. So there's a couple of things that we do with the eggs. One, we consume them. We make, like, eat them fresh. We use them for recipes. I also make my own pasta. So using home-raised, free-range eggs is a really great way to store a lot of really good nutrition and really healthy protein in your, all year round by preserving the eggs in pasta. And it's a really simple thing to do. It just takes a little bit of time. And so that's one of the things that we do. And that creates food sustainability for us for a whole year. We will make enough pasta to last us at least 6 to 12 months at a time. What I do is I also use the excess eggs, any eggs that get older. I have a freeze dryer. So what I do is I scramble them up and then I make them into a freeze dried product for our dogs as extra protein when we have, sometimes we get really cold here in Northern Alberta. It will get down to negative 55 degrees Celsius wind chills. And on those days, even though our dogs are inside in a heated space of our property, they are still subject to go outside, and sometimes just that hard weather, even just being cooped up inside, is very hard on them. So what we tend to do is when the temperatures get really cold, I create these freeze-dried eggs so that I can feed those for extra protein and fat to our animals, specifically our dogs. And then what I do with the shells is I use that as a garden amendment. I save all the shells and I crush them up and I use them as a garden amendment, either by putting them into a solution of fermented weeds that I am aerating to use as a homemade fertilizer. I will either amend it by putting eggshells in that, or I will just sprinkle that all over the soil, and it creates more of a calcium balance. I'm going to show you what it looks like where I've put some shavings on our garden. So this has just been cleaned out yesterday before the snow, and I just dumped it on here. What I'm going to be doing is just adding all of our clean outs, because I haven't cleaned out all of our barns yet, or spaces yet where we have shavings and litter or like horse manure. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of pile it all up in here and we'll spread it out. And I'm just going to leave it. I'm going to let it break down. I'm not going to rototill it or anything. And I'm going to see what it looks like in the spring. I'll probably put leaf mulch on top of this as well, just like some leaves. And I'm leaving these sunflowers stand because I'm going to feed the birds so they keep them away from the backside of my chicken coop. I don't want to give my chickens any diseases that might come from wild birds, and so I'm trying to keep them clear from the area where the chickens do come outside, and that's where I'm leaving these sunflowers over here for the wild birds. We also use the manure from our horses, and hey Coconut, we use the manure from our horses and we also apply that into our garden. We usually use it after the third year that it's had time to compost, and we just bring it in. to our flower farm and our garden space. This is where we had our flower farm this past year. We grew a majority of our flowers outside. We had a really good flower year. We harvested very heavily with the amendments that have been in here, and I've just been using homemade compost, and we did have some cattle manure brought in here and amended with that, and we're just keep on building. This year will be the last year we're tilling it. It's going to be going into all no-till, since we've worked in we've kind of broken up the clay here enough where we can now begin the process of turning it more into no-till. Coconut is kind of yes, Coconut, I know you're hungry. Let's go feed the horses. He's kind of hungry. Come on, buddy. Let's go, buddy. So while we're over at the horses, I may as well show you our compost pile that the horses have made for us. Well, they didn't make the pile, but they did make the manure to put in the pile. So let's go take a look and see what that looks like. So this is one of our compost piles that has been completed. We haven't had to turn it this year. It's really nice dirt in there. We'll need to turn it, but the chickens were coming on here scratching it. That manure is ready to go onto the garden. It doesn't have a lot of heat in it anymore because it's finished the process of composting. We can't forget about the barn cats. They have a very important job to make sure that the mice are kept out of our bulbs. So here on the flower farm, we have about 5,000 tulips in the ground right now, ready to grow for spring. And so the cats, they have a very important job, and that is to make sure we have a very small mouse population on our farm. And so it's really important that they're in really good health. Now, lots of people will say that you shouldn't feed your barn cats so that they go hunt. That's not true. We always make sure we take very good care of our barn cats, and we try to give them a pretty good diet. I do give them sometimes house scraps. I do sometimes give them protein. Byproducts of harvesting the chickens. When we do harvest chickens here for meat consumption, I do give them some of the byproducts of that to keep them healthy and working. So a cat that's really, really, really hungry is not going to waste energy looking for food. It'll probably sit by the door and meow. Our cats don't do that. They get their food. I usually feed them in the evening when the chickens aren't in here, because sometimes there's a chicken in here right now, so I can't feed them. But they will have their supper and then they go hunting at night, and they hunt in the greenhouse, they hunt in the garden, they hunt in our hay bales and our straw bales, in our compost piles. They hunt everywhere, and they do a very good job. We have not had a mouse in we've lived in this property almost 10 years. I think it's like 8 years now. And we've had a mouse in our house one time. They've done a really good job making sure that we have no mice in our house. And here are some of our kitties, our barn cats. We also use hay as mulch. So one of the things that I've been beginning to use more and more this year is moldy hay. So over here we have a bunch of hay that is really, really full of bad molds that we can't feed to our livestock. And so what I do is I've taken this hay. It doesn't have seeds in it. It's just like grassy hay. I don't know if you can see that, but it has a lot of molds, spores in it. So it makes my horses very sick. And I don't like putting this in the chicken coop or anything like that. But what it does do is it makes a really good ground cover and mulch in the garden. And so I've begun spreading this down either as a bottom layer, as kind of like a alfalfa meal. In some cases I've used it as an alfalfa meal when I had more alfalfa mix hay. And I put that in the bottom before I plant into it, and other times I just lay it on the surface. It decomposes. Even if there's seeds in here, what's been happening is the seeds rot because it's on the surface and they don't actually germinate. So that's been what I've been doing, and that is helping to feed our soil and create like a compost in place sort of situation. And then I have all of this hay as well. That is bad hay, and this will be going into the garden as well. So there's a few other things that I do add to the garden, and I will show you what they are here in a sec. But first off, I wanted to show you some of the things that we have applied in our garden space that we find very, very important on our homestead, and an important practice that a lot of homesteaders do but are afraid to talk about because a lot of the times they get attacked on social media or on these platforms. And like I was when I posted about it, which was processing chickens. I'll show you here something that we've done. One of the issues that we've had is like over here we have bulbs planted, and then this section here we've had some issues where the soil, we grew potatoes in here and we're having some problems with the soil and it needs some serious amending. So what we had to do, typically what you would do is you would go to the store and you would buy soil amendments and you would dump it all in here, and that would include bone meal and blood meal and feather meal to kind of get everything all fixed, re-amended so that the microbiology that's in the soil could actually do its job and begin to thrive again. What we did, instead of spending the money at the store on chemically processed amendments, is when we harvested our chickens, we had a bunch of roosters that were part of our flock, and that's just part of it. When you hatch chickens, when you have too many roosters, they don't really have a purpose. They begin to fight. Some of them, they start to get thin because it's competition with each other for food. They begin to suffer. Roosters on our property, they are meat birds. They are raised as such, and not only as meat birds, they are raised to use their feathers. We, in our garden, we actually, when we harvested our roosters, there was 9 that we actually processed this round, which is not a lot for meat birds, but we used every single bit of that bird. What we did is we used the feathers and any of the fluids, including when we washed the birds out with the water, we collected that water, because those are all amendments that the soil microbiology needs to thrive. And we used the feather and blood meal and applied it into this garden space to start healing the soil so that the microbiology can begin rebuilding itself. And as we're going into a no-till system. I do debone my birds, and when I debone my birds, I'm able to use the carcasses to make stock. Now, when I make chicken stock or bone broth, what I do is I usually the minimum I will get is 10 quarts. But my target is always 14 quarts because that's 2 canner loads. So if I can get a concentrated one out, and then I can add more water and let it simmer while the other one is pressure canning. What I do is at the end of the canning session from making my 14 quarts from one carcass, I take the bones because the bones are really soft, and I strain out those bones and all the vegetable bits and pieces that I've added, and then I apply that into my garden as well. So that's bone meal. right? That's bone meal. So I don't have to buy any chemically processed amendments to fix my soil. I'm using all organic, free-range birds that I have raised, that have been raised on this property in this tiny little footprint that I have created or carved out here. And we're creating more biodiversity here just by completing a cycle, and using all of the parts, everything. So, one of the other things that makes me very proud of the way we're doing this is because we have, for an example, if I was to can one chicken, the only waste that I have from the broth and the actual canned chicken product, or even frozen chicken product, is the lids, because I can use reusable freezer bags to put the protein in. And the jars are reusable that I'm putting the stock into. Even if I was to freeze the stock, I can reuse those containers over and over and over. I'm not creating garbage. And if I do pressure can the stock from these chickens, I am essentially the only waste I have is the lids, which can be which can not composted, but they can be recycled. So my footprint is very, very minimal. Let's do some chicken math. So one chicken that I processed can give me 14 quart jars of broth or stock, aside from the meat that we already are going to be using to feed my family. We get 14 quarts of bone broth or chicken stock from the carcass, which is the byproduct of deboning our own chickens. The quart jars themselves are reusable, as are the rings. The only part that I'm wasting, or what garbage I'm generating, is the lids, which look like this. This is 14 lids for the quarts that I would get from pressure canning the broth from one chicken. Okay, so this is how much waste I am creating, how much garbage I've created by processing my own broth. Now, if I was to buy this at a store, this is the equivalency of how much waste I am creating, equivalent to how much volume I have canned myself and preserved at home. Of course, this can be recycled, but how much pollution is created by recycling this volume of cans? So I processed 9 roosters, which is this equivalency times 9 if I was going to the grocery store and purchasing it. This is a lot of pollution. I can't imagine the amount of pollution would be created just recycling this volume of waste. I definitely am proud of what I've done. I'm not creating a lot of environmental impact. I'm not buying bags of fertilizer from the store that's been chemically processed, that I don't know what's in it. The chemicals that I'm putting in my soil, they mean a lot. Like, it matters. It really, really matters, because my number one priority is fixing the soil biology so that I have a good crop. And so by adding the nutrients, the blood meal, the feather meal, the bone meal to this garden space and feeding the microbiology, that will create better plant health. That'll create better resistance to pest pressure and disease pressure, which means I don't have to use chemicals to deal with it. In fact, I just actually grew a 7.5 pound cabbage. And here, usually red cabbages are not affected by bugs, but in our climate they are, because the bugs pressure here is so bad. I had no bug pressure. I used no chemicals. It was organically grown. And it's because I used this method of using all of the parts, using all of the animal, using the amendments that I have grown here on this property, and I know exactly what's in it. And that's really important to me. So that's what's here. In this bed here is feather meal, bone meal, and blood meal from the harvest that we had from our chickens that actually grew up here. They grew here. And some people may say that that's not good. And actually one of our commenters actually said, do I know about the golden rule? Yes, I do. And I'm creating far less harm than somebody who shops for tofu at a supermarket, because the microbiome is really important and it matters to your future. So I'll show you an application of where I am using hay and shavings and even bark to create some sustainability on our farm here. We're just chasing some guineas. One sec. So over here, mushroom spores. These are wine cap mycelium, and so they are growing here. They've already bloomed a couple times this year, and in fact this is a picture of what they look like. So what this is to do, this is doing is I have cardboard underneath of this old hay, and I have hardwood shavings from our mill. So what I just showed you, all of those shavings. I have shavings of birch, which is hardwood. So this is actually layered with cardboard, because underneath the cardboard that brings in earthworms, because earthworms really, really like it. And then the mycelium, it eats the hardwood and the hay. So the hay helps keep the weed down and the moisture in, and it helps them bloom. So I have harvested, I actually freeze dried 2 loads of these mushrooms, and this is its first year. They've done exceptionally well. Mycelium actually helps the soil keep moisture, which is something that we've been really struggling with here on our farm, is because this is old farmland, commercial farmland, and it's clay. So it really had a hard time once it dried out. It could not retain moisture. So this is helping create a more looser soil, and it's helping it retain moisture. So this is one of the things that we're doing. I've put this here because I want it to start going inside of my greenhouse, and I'll show you that in a second. But this is all going to get done today, sometime this weekend, I guess, or this week. I'm going to try to get the rest of this row done like this, so that the mycelium will keep spreading throughout the spring. So once we have, like, this is all going to slough down with snow, so it'll be really well insulated. But I want to make sure that it's protected, and that the hay is going to create a really nice environment for those mushroom spores to keep populating and working on the soil. Also bring in lots of earthworms. This here also, I'm using this to kind of break down. I've put some of the bark here. Over here, I'm going to lay cardboard down and also continue the bark on in front to keep it a little bit cleaner, and to help build this soil up and create more of an environment for the earthworms to come in and start doing their thing, and also to help with the drainage, because right now it's not really functioning 100%, but it's getting better. Over here, my mulch is leaves. I rake up the leaves and I stack them on top. I might actually come in and just blanket it with hay as well, just so we have a little bit of an extra barrier. Because we live in zone 2B, we grow a lot of plants here, like the tulip bulbs are zone 3. So we have to create more protection. Usually we're good because we get so much snow, it creates a nice insulation. But this year we seem to be having cooler temperatures before we get that big snow load. So that has me concerned. So what I need to do is create more layers, put more straw or hay, not straw, I don't use straw. I put hay on top, and more leaves. Put as many leaves as I can. I could even put some shavings down here, or like the wood chips if I wanted to, but I'm probably going to use the hay because I have an abundance, and that will create a really nice insulation layer. The one thing I do have to be concerned about using hay is the mice problem, and mice do really like to eat tulips. So I'm going to have to allow my cats access here to be hunters in this area and make sure that they are drawn to this area. So I might have to allow them to live in my greenhouse over the winter to make sure that they are hunting these populations of mice that move in wherever I have hay. So that's something that I do have to be mindful of, even though I don't really want cats in my greenhouse and in my garden beds inside. It's just something that I'm going to have to compromise on, and it is what it is. Put a litter box in there, I guess. So we are inside of the greenhouse, and as you can see, I have shavings down here and some weeds, but I have to come in and pull them. But underneath the shavings, I have cardboard, and then this is birch. So birch is a hardwood shaving. And again, that mycelium from those mushroom spores eat hardwood. So what I can do is over the winter, I can actually bring hay in here, which I'm not going to. I'm just going to leave it as shavings. I'm actually going to bring more in and give it another covering once we start cutting birch again. But I'm just hoping that will come in inside and begin helping to build on the soil. Underneath these shavings is lots of cardboard, and that cardboard is bringing in earthworms, which is aerating my soil, and it's helping me create compost in place, which makes this going to be a no-till environment eventually. We have all kinds of cut flowers still growing in here. As long as the soil has health, the soil microbiome, look it, like it'll support the life. We have sunflowers growing. There's no heat. That right there, that's eucalyptus. I just harvested a whole bunch. There's networks of microbiome. The microbiology is creating these networks in the soil and beginning a composting process. It's creating heat, it's creating warmth. Although this is a greenhouse, it's not heated, and these plants should not have survived these cold temperatures. It's because of the application that I'm doing. It's because of how the soil is functioning and the soil health, how it's beginning to come back to life. We have the microbiology beginning to live in the soil that's creating this to be a healthy environment. And I will come in here with bone meal and blood meal and feather meal as well, as I'm amending these sections. And I actually did do that already in here, but I used commercial. I purchased it. It was organic. Some of the items you just don't have control or know what applications have been done to them. So even though I had bought in commercial amendments for this greenhouse, and I have treated the soil with them, I just don't know 100% what is in them. And there is always, I don't know what was fed to the birds. I don't know what was in the bones. I don't know if the bird had cancer, right? Like, these are all things that I don't know, I don't have control over, which is why, as a homesteader, it makes it much more efficient and much more sustainable for me to raise those birds, use them to feed my family, and use the byproducts to feed the microbiome and repair the soil of all the damage that's been done to it over the past however many years that it's been farmed. Another application we use on our farm is biochar, which is using carbon to hold nutrients and introduce that back into the soil. And that is something I would like to do a separate video on to show you how we use that. There's so many other ways that we are more sustainable on our farm, but I just wanted to kind of give you an oversight of some of the things that we do and the resourcefulness that we practice here in Northern Alberta and what is working for us. Maybe this will inspire you. Farming doesn't have to be always such a high cost and expense when you're doing it on a small scale. There are things that you can do, that you can apply, that don't cost anything. I know it can be overwhelming when you start reading and learning about products and learning about pest control. You're going to do one of two things. You're either going to spend money or you're going to spend time. And sometimes when you take the time, it ends up costing you less time in the long run anyways, and it doesn't cost you any money. So you may as well just spend the time. That's my motto here on our farm. So the traditional way is not working for us. Our yields were really low where we were doing traditional types of farming in our climate. The way I've begun working on doing our soil health and reconditioning our soil and making sure those networks of microbiology is healthy and thriving in the soil, what that has begun the process of doing is giving us more yields. I purchased this greenhouse last November. I made enough money off of the small footprint that I had created to earn the finances back that I had put into this structure in the first place. So this method works. What I was expecting was it to take a couple of years in order to earn that back just on the cut flowers and just to get this going. But it wasn't. It surprised me. Being sustainable and resourceful, it has led to a lot of really amazing things. And I hope this inspires you in some way to try new methods and try new things. One of the other things that I do is when I weed my garden, I actually take those weeds, whether if I need a solution of compost tea that is going to be high in nitrogen, I just take the greens and I put them in a drum or a tote and I fill it with dugout water, which is basically compost tea. And then I stir it every day. I will also add eggshells and I stir that every day, multiple times a day, to make sure that there's air getting incorporated into there. Or you can put a bubbler in there so that it doesn't go anaerobic, but I just stir it. It's probably not the proper method, but it's been working for me and my plants have done very, very well with it. If I need some that are going to help set fruit, I will harvest weeds that have flowers on them, and then I compost that into a tea, doing the same method with fermenting them or breaking them down in dugout water and stirring it with eggshells in there every day. And this is what it looks like. I'll show you. These would get mixed every day. They're frozen right now, but this is the tubs that I use, and I would cover them. You would want to put a netting or a screen so you don't get a bunch of larvae in there, but I mix it every day and make sure that there's aeration in there. And then you just take the liquid and then you apply it to your garden space. And that's how I was making fertilizer for my plants, and that's how I made my plants do so well this year. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. I really appreciate you being here. Much love. We'll catch you next time. Bye for now.